You're listening to the Mechanic.com.au Smoko Sessions, where we put our premier community partners into the hot seat. This week's question is, what is your number one tip to boost sales? First up is Ian from Bendix Brakes.
It's understanding what your customers' needs are and what their driving style is. So basically, we have 5 simple questions that you can ask the customer before he even gets into your workshop. And these basically are, what factors are important to the driver? So is brake feel, noise, or the amount of brake dust, is that important? So you can choose your brake pads based upon that. Second question, how does the driver use their vehicle? So do they do a lot of heavy traffic? Are they stop starting, or is a lot of freeway driving, or they do towing? Or the third question is, what vehicle are the brake pads getting to? So is it a light commercial vehicle? Is it a full drive? Is it a taxi? Is it a tradie's ute who travels quite a few kilometres and tows a trailer? Fourth question is the vehicle obviously being used for towing? Obviously going back to the ute question, or it might be one of your customers who has a full drive and he takes his lovely boat down the coast for a holiday on the weekend. And the last question is, does the owner haul heavy loads regularly? Again, that gets back to if you're a light commercial vehicle, if you're just a tradie with a ute. So all these questions can answer. You can be able to determine what your customers' needs are very quickly, and you then determine that, but then choose the right Bendix brake pad for their purpose.
Thanks, Ian. Next is Brendan from Penrite Oil.
Okay, actually, on this one, it's to boost sales for, say, a workshop. One of the things we always recommend that workshops do is do things properly. And things like using an engine flush, and then like using an injector cleaner, like post-service, is something that OEMs do with cars. It's cheap for the workshop to do, and it adds an extra return that they wouldn't have got otherwise.
Good one, Brendan. Next is Will from Trico.
Definitely keeping stock of beam and conventional blades on site at the workshop. Customers that have the product available to them straight away are much more likely to have a changeover than waiting. It's not the kind of thing that a customer would wait for. Now, Trico's multi-fit system allows a workshop to hold only, say, 12 beam blade lengths, and that covers more than 95% of all vehicle demand. The best thing about Trico's systems is that our merchandisers are commercial quality, and they actually come free of charge. You just need to buy the stock for them, and we'll send out the merchandiser. You can ask your local rep about that, and they should be able to get one to you quickly.
Nice, we all love a freebie. Next is Bryden from Monroe Shock Absorbers.
Definitely the revenue opportunity with replacing shocks. It's a product that's out of sight, out of mind, and if we can encourage every technician to at least do a shock check, then the likelihood of them seeing more and more vehicles that need shock replacement is greater. And with that inspection increase, obviously sales will increase, and therefore sales will increase. So it's a win-win. The more you look at, the more you get, the more opportunity.
Love it. Next up is Johnny from Century Batteries.
Test the battery in every vehicle that comes into your business. It only takes a few minutes and you can generate excellent financial benefit. Statistics have shown that over 76% of batteries replaced roadside were either in a workshop or retailer that could have supplied a new battery 3 months prior to the battery failing. The increased loads from modern vehicles these days will not give you the warning like they did in the past.
These are good points, I mean, how long does it take to do a bounce test or test a battery? And at the end of the day, if you've got faulty parts there, it's a win for the customer, it's a win for the tech, it's a win for the workshop. Next up is Chris from Exedy.
To boost sales, certainly from a mechanic's point of view, is to certainly ask questions of the owner of the vehicle, understand what their intended use of the vehicle is going to be, and that gives them a chance to upsell them to a heavy-duty version or a Safari Tough version. So if the car's going to be used for towing or four-wheel drive use, instead of just thinking the customer needs a standard replacement, ask questions, and it's like the old McDonald's saying, upsize it sort of thing. So with a clutch, the same can happen if you think the customer needs it.
And I want to just underline one thing here. When we're talking about boosting sales and upselling, it can have a bit of a negative connotation to it. But at the end of the day, the tradie is going to want the heavy-duty brake pads. The customer with a faulty battery is going to want to replace it in the workshop, not broken down on the side of the road. And the forward driver is going to want the heavy-duty off-road clutch. And even if they don't, at a bare minimum, we've provided those options and solutions to them. So if they do go ahead, it's a win for the workshop and it's a win for the customer. Next up is Ian from Gates Australia.
Okay, the number one thing really to look at is we recommend you look at the entire system. So often people will, workshops, mechanics will look at a belt and if it's worn, they'll replace the belt. But we need to look at the entire system. So typically idler pulleys, particularly things like the tensioner, alternator decoupling pulleys or overrun pulleys. If there's a torsional vibration dampener on the crankshaft, have a look at those as well. So the service life of the belt's increased massively over the last few years. So 100 to 150,000 Ks is not unknown, and not unusual. And what we recommend is the whole system is designed to run as a system. So when the belt's worn, there's a fair chance that any pulleys or tensioners and TVDs, etc., are also worn. So they'll need replacing.
Thanks, Ian. Next is James from NGK.
Right, so for vehicles fitted with oxygen sensors running in parallel, for example 2 pre-cat or 2 post-cat sensors, NTK recommend replacing the pair when one is diagnosed as requiring replacement in order to maintain oxygen sensor symmetry. The reasoning behind this is during normal operation, parallel oxygen sensor reference values are very similar, and these sensors usually age at the same rate. When one oxygen sensor is replaced, an imbalance can occur between the pair. This means the switching speeds of the newly replaced sensor will be faster than the older sensor, and this can lead to the ECU receiving conflicting reference signals for the two sensors, causing incorrect air-fuel mixture. Therefore, NTK recommend replacing both parallel oxygen sensors at the same time. If you don't, the results could be failure of the second sensor shortly after, premature failure of the newly replaced sensor, poor fuel economy, increased exhaust gas emissions, and a reduction in engine performance.
I may be wrong here, but I'm sure there's a few of us out there who aren't following that practice, so it may be worth thinking about. Next up is Steve from DBA.
Being confident in the advice you give the customer pulls the sale through. Most consumers want to be reassured they're making the right choices. DBA has developed some reference guides for most driving applications that are available on the website, or if you catch up with one of the sales team, they'll give you a printed copy. The guide makes informed selections with a few options for different budgets.
That's a good point. I mean, you're trying to sell an item. If you're not confident in what you're selling or the right decision to make between parts, it's just going to plant seeds of doubt in your customer's mind and as Steve said, make it harder to pull that sale through. Next up is Jeff from Ryco.
It's cabin filters for us. We believe and I believe it's a pretty underserviced area. It seems pretty straightforward. The cabin filters are often a very easy job to change. They're behind the glove box. It's even a very DIY friendly job, but you'd be amazed at how neglected cabin filter servicing is. We see plenty that are really grotty, and I mean you can even change them as often as with every oil filter, and it's a really good one because for their customers, you can show them the old filter and hey guys, this is the stuff you were breathing if they object. So I think it's a real money for jam change. If you change the cabin filters more often, it's easy to explain it to the driver or the owner of the vehicle to say that we needed to change it because look, hey, you don't really want to breathe this stuff, and it's a pretty easy job. So we think that's a great way to boost sales.
Absolutely. Again, it just comes down to doing those quick checks. Last but not least, we have James from Nava.
Display our posters and merchandisers. Branding always helps. We're always working on updating desk mats, posters, calendars, etc. So there'll be a new 2019 calendar coming out. Another good tip is to make sure you've got the correct stock on the shelf because it's much easier to sell when you've got the good stock levels.
Absolutely. If you don't have it, you can't sell it. And James actually brings up a very good point there. Not just Nava, but most of our Premier community partners have an awesome range of advertising, educational and marketing material for customers. And in most cases, they're more than happy to give those to you for free. So don't hesitate to hit up your local rep when they're out on the road or in the Mechanic.com.au private Facebook group. Thanks for tuning into this week's episode of Smoko Sessions, and make sure you're back here next week for the question, what is the number one challenge you think mechanics have with servicing your product category, and how to solve those problems. See you next week.